The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between three star systems. Its gleaming metal halls stretched for miles in every direction. Inside the main meeting chamber, representatives from 12 different alien species sat around a circular table that could hold hundreds of beings. Commander Vexthul stood at the center of the room. His crystalline body caught the light from the overhead panels and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. The Zephyrian military leader activated the holographic display system with a gesture from his six-fingered hand. Blue light filled the air above the table, showing star charts and fleet positions from across known space. "We gather today to discuss military capabilities and potential threats," Vexthul announced. His voice carried the musical tone that all Zephyrians possessed. Each species will present their assessment of naval strength in their assigned sectors. Captain Jake Morrison sat quietly in the section reserved for human representatives. His weathered face showed no expression as he watched the other species begin their presentations. The middle-aged officer had attended these meetings for 3 years now. He wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, which looked plain compared to the elaborate costumes worn by other species. Lieutenant Zara Collins sat beside Morrison, taking notes on her electronic tablet. The young woman had short brown hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She had studied alien cultures for years before being assigned as Morrison's aide. She knew that humans were considered one of the newer and less advanced species in this gathering. The first to speak was Admiral Sesketh from the reptilian hegemony, the 7-foot-tall lizard being moved to the presentation area with fluid grace. His scales were dark green with gold markings that indicated his high rank. When he spoke, his forked tongue flicked out between sharp teeth. "The hegemony controls 47 star systems," Sesketh hissed. "Our fleet consists of 8,000 warships, each armed with plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. We maintain the largest standing army in this sector of the galaxy." Murmurs of respect came from around the table. The reptilian hegemony was known for their aggressive military doctrine and powerful weapons technology. Their ships were heavily armored and could survive battles that would destroy vessels from most other species. Next came the representative from the aquatic consortium. The being looked like a large jellyfish floating in a tank of water that moved on mechanical legs. Bubbles rose through the blue liquid as it spoke through a translation device. "Our underwater cities produce bioships that can regenerate damage during combat," the aquatic being gurgled. "We have mastered the art of living vessels that grow stronger with each battle. Our fleet numbers in the thousands and each ship is unique." The presentation continued around the table. Each species boasted of their military achievements and technological advances. The insectoid hive mind showed images of swarm tactics that could overwhelm any enemy through sheer numbers. The crystalline Zephyrians demonstrated their mathematical precision in fleet coordination that allowed perfect synchronization across vast distances. When it came time for the human presentation, all eyes turned to Morrison. The captain stood slowly and walked to the display area. He activated a simple hologram showing Earth's solar system and the handful of colonies that humanity had established. "Humanity controls 12 star systems," Morrison said in a calm voice. "Our fleet consists of approximately 200 vessels of various classes. We focus on adaptability and innovation rather than raw numbers." Several beings around the table made sounds that could only be described as alien laughter. Admiral Sesketh's scales rattled in what Morrison knew was the reptilian equivalent of chuckling. 200 ships? Sesketh hissed. "How do you expect to defend your territory with such a small force?" Morrison returned to his seat without answering. He had learned long ago that these beings judged military strength only by the numbers they could see and count. They had no understanding of human creativity or the projects that Earth kept hidden from galactic view. Commander Vexthul brought up the next topic on the agenda. "We have been monitoring communications from various species," he announced. "Some of the intercepted transmissions contain claims that seem highly unlikely." The holographic display changed to show fragments of military communications. Most were routine reports about fleet movements and supply lines, but mixed among them were messages that made the assembled aliens buzz with amusement. "These communications come from human military channels," Vexthul continued. "They contain references to what humans call ghost ships that can appear and disappear at will. There are reports of vessels that supposedly phase through solid matter and exist in multiple dimensions at once. The laughter from around the table grew louder. The representative from the Silicon-based collective made a sound like grinding gears that indicated extreme amusement among his species. Humans have quite an imagination, the collective representative stated in a mechanical voice. Perhaps they confuse their entertainment fiction with actual military capability. Lieutenant Collins felt her jaw tighten as she listened to the mockery, but Morrison placed a quiet hand on her arm. The captain's expression never changed as the other species continued to find humor in human military reports. The Aquatic Consortium's representative bubbled with laughter. "We have analyzed human naval doctrine," it gurgled. "Their training manuals reference tactics that would require impossible physics. They speak of ships that can bend space and time, of weapons that fire through dimensions that do not exist." Admiral Sisketh activated his own display, showing intelligence reports that the hegemony had gathered about human military activities. "Our spies report that humans conduct training exercises with vessels that allegedly vanish from all sensors," he hissed. "They claim their ships can be in multiple locations simultaneously." The reptilian admiral's scales rattled with amusement. "Either humans are delusional about their own capabilities, or they are deliberately spreading false information to make themselves seem more dangerous than they actually are." Commander Vexthul nodded his crystalline head. "The mathematical probability of the technologies described in these reports approaches zero," he stated. "The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of entire star systems." Morrison listened to the discussion with growing irritation, though his face showed nothing. These beings thought they understood the limits of what was possible in the universe. They had built their civilizations on technologies that followed predictable rules and measurable parameters. They could not conceive of species that refused to accept those limitations. The meeting continued for another hour as the assembled representatives shared intelligence about human activities that they found amusing or impossible. They discussed reports of human vessels that could phase through asteroid fields, weapons that could target enemies across dimensional barriers, and shield systems that existed partially outside normal space. By the end of the session, the consensus among the alien species was clear. Humanity was either suffering from collective delusions about their military capabilities, or they were engaged in an elaborate disinformation campaign designed to frighten potential enemies. As the meeting concluded, Morrison finally stood to address the assembly. His voice carried across the chamber with quiet authority that made several beings pause their conversations to listen. "You have spent considerable time discussing what you believe to be impossible," Morrison said. "I would suggest that your understanding of possibility may be limited by your own experiences." Admiral Sisketh's eyes narrowed to slits. "Are you claiming that these ridiculous reports are accurate?" he hissed. "Do you expect us to believe that human ships can defy the fundamental laws of physics?" Morrison looked directly at the reptilian admiral. "I am saying that humanity has always specialized in making the impossible become routine," he replied. "Your laughter may be premature." The captain gathered his materials and walked toward the exit with Collins following close behind. Behind them, the alien representatives returned to their mockery and dismissal of human capabilities. They were convinced that humanity was either delusional or desperate enough to fabricate impossible military achievements. What none of them knew was that deep in a classified facility orbiting Earth, the final tests of Project Wraith were entering their most critical phase. The myths they mocked were about to become reality. 3 months had passed since the meeting at Nexus Prime. The laughter of the alien representatives still echoed in the memories of those who had attended, but now something strange was happening across the galaxy. Long-range sensor stations began picking up readings that made no sense according to known physics. Captain Lisa Chen commanded the most advanced stealth destroyer in the reptilian hegemony fleet. The ship was called the Shadow Strike, and it had been built using the best technology that reptilian engineers could design. Chen had been recruited from Earth's Naval Academy 15 years earlier when the hegemony offered her a chance to command cutting-edge vessels that humanity could not yet build. The human woman had adapted well to serving alongside reptilian crews. Her Asian features and calm demeanor had earned respect among beings who valued discipline and tactical thinking. She wore the black uniform of a hegemony captain, with gold markings that showed her senior rank in their military structure. "Captain, we are approaching the coordinates. announced her first officer, a reptilian named Kesistar. His dark green scales had silver patterns that indicated his role as a navigation specialist. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy distortions in this sector. Chen studied the display screens that surrounded her command chair. The readings made no logical sense. Energy signatures appeared and disappeared within seconds, leaving no trace of what had caused them. The patterns suggested the presence of large vessels, but nothing appeared on visual scanners or gravitational detectors. "Run a full spectrum analysis," Chen ordered. "I want to know what we are dealing with before we get any closer." The Shadow Strike had been sent to investigate reports of unusual activity near the disputed Kepler sector. Intelligence suggested that someone was conducting unauthorized military operations in the region. The hegemony wanted to know who was responsible and what kind of technology they were using. Meanwhile, in a different part of space, Commander Ryan Fletcher stood on the bridge of a vessel that officially did not exist. The USS Phoenix looked like a standard human cruiser from the outside, but its internal systems were unlike anything else in known space. The ship hummed with energy that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Fletcher was a tall man with graying hair and eyes that had seen too many classified briefings. He had spent 20 years in Earth's regular Navy before being recruited for Project Wraith. The commander wore a black uniform with no visible rank insignia, following the security protocols that governed all personnel involved in dimensional warfare research. "Dr. Price, what is our current phase status?" Fletcher asked. Dr. Amanda Price looked up from her control console, which was covered with displays that showed mathematical equations instead of normal ship systems. The middle-aged scientist had wild red hair that she never seemed to have time to properly style. Her green eyes sparkled with excitement as she monitored readings that would have been impossible just 5 years earlier. "We are currently existing at 60% standard reality," Price reported. "The quantum displacement drives are maintaining stable dimensional flux. We can phase to full visibility in 3 seconds or drop to complete dimensional separation in less than 2. The Phoenix was not just using stealth technology. The ship existed partially outside normal space-time, occupying a state between dimensions that allowed it to appear and disappear at will. What the aliens at Nexus Prime had dismissed as mythology was actually the result of breakthrough research in quantum physics that humanity had kept absolutely secret. "Sensors. Detect a hegemony destroyer approaching our test area," reported Lieutenant Bobby Martinez from the tactical station. The young officer had been born on Mars and had never seen Earth, but he carried the human determination that had made dimensional warfare possible. "Should we avoid contact?" Fletcher considered the options. The Phoenix was conducting final field tests of its revolutionary systems. The ship needed to demonstrate its capabilities in realistic conditions, but direct contact with alien vessels could compromise the entire project. "Maintain current phase status," Fletcher decided. "Let them get a good look at what they think they understand." The Shadow Strike continued its approach toward the energy distortions. Captain Chen watched her screens with growing confusion as the readings became more erratic. Massive energy signatures appeared for brief moments before vanishing completely. Whatever was causing the disturbances seemed to be playing games with the laws of physics. "Captain, I am detecting a vessel," Kesistar announced suddenly. "It appears to be a human cruiser, but the readings are highly unusual." Chen leaned forward in her command chair. "Put it on main screen." The display showed empty space for several seconds. Then, like a ghost materializing from another world, the outline of a human warship began to appear. The vessel seemed to flicker between existing and not existing, as if it could not decide which reality it wanted to occupy. "That is impossible," whispered the reptilian sensor operator. "No ship can exist in that state." The Phoenix became fully visible for exactly 10 seconds. During that time, every sensor on the Shadow Strike recorded readings that defied explanation. The human vessel appeared to be drawing power from sources that did not exist in normal space. Its hull seemed to be made of materials that registered on some scanners but not others. Dr. Price monitored the test from her station aboard the Phoenix. The dimensional drives were performing perfectly, allowing the ship to control its existence across multiple layers of reality. The technology that made this possible had taken decades to develop, building on theoretical physics that most species considered impossible. "The alien vessel is scanning us," Price reported. "They are getting readings, but nothing that will help them understand what they are seeing." Fletcher nodded. The point of this test was to demonstrate that human vessels could operate beyond the understanding of other species. The Phoenix was proof that humanity had mastered forces that aliens thought were pure fantasy. The human ship began to fade from view again, but not in the way that normal stealth technology worked. Instead of simply becoming invisible, the Phoenix appeared to be moving sideways out of normal reality. Parts of the vessel became transparent while other sections seemed to exist in multiple locations at once. Captain Chen watched in amazement as the human ship performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. The vessel appeared to turn inside out, existing on both sides of itself simultaneously. Then it split into 3 identical images before merging back into a single ship that promptly vanished completely. "Are you recording this?" Chen asked her crew. "Yes, Captain, but the recordings make no more sense than what we are seeing directly," Kessitar replied. "The computer systems cannot process what they are detecting." The Shadow Strike's sensors showed that the space where the human vessel had been was now completely empty. No energy signatures, no gravitational disturbances, no trace that anything had ever been there. But the recordings proved that something impossible had just occurred in front of their eyes. Fletcher ordered the Phoenix to phase back to standard reality one more time. The ship appeared again, this time directly beside the reptilian destroyer. The 2 vessels were close enough that their crews could see each other through the viewports. But the human ship showed no signs of the massive energy expenditure that such precise maneuvering should have required. "Send them a message," Fletcher ordered. Standard diplomatic greeting. The communication reached the Shadow Strike, carrying a simple message from Commander Fletcher to Captain Chen. The human officer politely identified his vessel and requested that the reptilian ship maintain safe distance during ongoing military exercises. Chen stared at the message display. The human was treating impossible physics as routine military exercises. The vessel that had just demonstrated technology beyond reptilian understanding was acting as if dimensional manipulation was standard operating procedure. "Transmit a reply," Chen ordered. "Request information about the technology being demonstrated." The response came back immediately. Commander Fletcher politely declined to provide technical details, stating that the information was classified under human military security protocols. He thanked the Shadow Strike for their cooperation and wished them safe travels. Then the Phoenix vanished again, this time with no sensor trace whatsoever. The space around the Shadow Strike returned to normal readings, as if the impossible human vessel had never existed at all. Captain Chen sat in her command chair, staring at the empty space where the Phoenix had been. Everything she thought she knew about military technology had just been challenged by a human ship that treated impossible physics as routine operations. "Set course for Hegemony Headquarters," Chen ordered. "Priority transmission to Admiral Sisketh. We have encountered something that Command needs to know about immediately." The Shadow Strike turned away from the test area and jumped to faster-than-light travel. Behind them, the Phoenix rematerialized and continued its field tests. Dr. Price made notes about the successful demonstration while Commander Fletcher planned the next phase of operations. The myths about human warships were becoming reality, one impossible demonstration at a time. The aliens who had mocked human capabilities at Nexus Prime were about to learn that their understanding of what was the emergency session at Nexus Prime was unlike anything the Galactic Trade Federation had seen in decades. Representatives from every major species had arrived within hours of receiving the priority alerts. The same beings who had laughed at human military reports 3 months earlier now sat in worried silence as intelligence briefings flooded the main chamber. Commander Vexthal stood at the center of the room, his crystalline body reflecting the harsh emergency lighting that bathed the assembly hall. The Zephyrian leader activated multiple holographic displays simultaneously, filling the air with star charts marked with red warning symbols. "We have confirmed reports of unusual vessel activity in 47 different star systems," Vexthal announced. His musical voice carried an edge of concern that made every being in the chamber pay attention. The encounters matched the human military communications that we previously dismissed as impossible. Admiral Sisketh rose from his seat, his dark green scales showing the pale patches that indicated stress among reptilian beings. The Hegemony military leader had received Captain Chen's report personally, and the impossible recordings had shaken his confidence in everything he thought he knew about space warfare. "My best captain encountered one of these vessels," Sisketh hissed. The recordings show technology that should not exist. The human ship appeared and disappeared at will, existing in states that our scientists cannot explain. The Aquatic Consortium's representative bubbled frantically in its water tank. The translation device struggled to keep up with the rapid stream of concerns being expressed in underwater sounds and chemical releases. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected similar anomalies, the aquatic being gurgled, ships that register on some sensors but not others, vessels that seem to occupy multiple locations simultaneously. Captain Jake Morrison entered the chamber as the reports continued. The human diplomat wore the same simple blue uniform that had drawn mockery during the previous meeting, but now every eye followed his movement to the human section. Lieutenant Zara Collins walked beside him, carrying data tablets that contained information the other species desperately wanted to understand. The silicon-based collective's representative spoke in mechanical tones that carried none of its previous amusement. Our mathematical models cannot account for the energy signatures being detected. The power requirements for the observed phenomena exceed our understanding of possible physics. Morrison took his seat and listened to the growing panic among the alien representatives. These beings had built their civilizations on the assumption that certain physical laws were absolute. They could not comprehend species that refused to accept those limitations as permanent barriers. Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded the human fleet from the bridge of the USS Phantom, a vessel that existed even deeper in dimensional space than the Phoenix. The Phantom was invisible to conventional detection methods because it occupied a reality layer that other species did not know existed. Sullivan was a veteran officer with silver hair and steel-gray eyes that had seen humanity's most classified projects develop from theoretical concepts to practical weapons. She wore the black uniform of Project Wraith with the confidence of someone who had helped turn impossible science into military doctrine. Status report from all dimensional vessels, Sullivan ordered. The responses came from locations across known space. Human ships were appearing in heavily defended systems, just long enough to prove they could penetrate any defense. The demonstrations were carefully planned to show capability without triggering actual warfare. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker reported from the USS Spectre near the crystalline homeworlds. We materialized inside their primary defense grid for 15 seconds. Their sensors detected us, but their weapons could not achieve target lock. Commander Beth Williams checked in from the USS Wraith operating near the insectoid territories. The hive mind swarm tactics are useless against targets they cannot predict or track. We demonstrated phase shift combat maneuvers that left their entire fleet firing at empty space. Dr. Amanda Price monitored the fleet operations from her position aboard the Phoenix. The dimensional physicist watched as her theoretical work transformed galactic military balance in real time. The equations she had developed in secret laboratories were now reshaping how wars would be fought across the stars. Back at Nexus Prime, the alien representatives struggled to comprehend reports that challenged everything they thought they understood. The crystalline Zephyrians had deployed their most advanced mathematical processing units to analyze the encounters, but their calculations kept producing impossible results. The energy patterns suggest dimensional manipulation on a scale we considered purely theoretical, reported the Zephyrian chief scientist. The humans appear to have mastered technologies that we believed were centuries away from practical application. Morrison finally stood to address the assembly. The chamber fell silent as every being waited to hear what the human representative would say. The same captain who had been dismissed as delusional 3 months earlier now commanded the complete attention of galactic civilization. You have spent considerable time analyzing what you observe, Morrison said calmly. Perhaps it would be more productive to consider what you have failed to understand about human capabilities. Admiral Sis Keth's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. Are you claiming responsibility for these impossible vessels? He demanded. Do you expect us to believe that humanity has developed technology that defies the fundamental laws of physics? Morrison looked directly at the reptilian admiral. I am suggesting that your understanding of fundamental laws may be incomplete, he replied. Humanity has always specialized in expanding the boundaries of what others consider possible. The insectoid hive mind representative clicked and buzzed in agitation. Through its translation device, the collective intelligence expressed confusion and growing alarm. The tactical implications are beyond our ability to counter. How does one fight an enemy that exists partially outside normal space? Lieutenant Collins watched the alien representatives with growing satisfaction. These beings had dismissed human military doctrine as fantasy, but now they were discovering that humanity's approach to warfare operated on principles they had never imagined. Admiral Sullivan coordinated the next phase of demonstrations. From her position in dimensional space, the Phantom and its sister ships had been ordered to showcase the full range of human capabilities without revealing the underlying technology that made such feats possible. All vessels, prepare for synchronized manifestation, Sullivan commanded. We will appear simultaneously in every major system controlled by Federation members. The operation began with perfect precision. Human warships phased into normal space around alien homeworlds, military installations and defense platforms across the galaxy. The vessels appeared for exactly 60 seconds, long enough to be detected and recorded by every sensor array in known space. The demonstrations were not threatening in nature, but their implications were unmistakable. Humanity could reach any location in galactic space at will, appearing inside supposedly impenetrable defenses without warning. The strategic balance that had maintained peace between species for centuries had been fundamentally altered. Commander Ryan Fletcher watched the reactions of alien forces from his bridge aboard the Phoenix. Reptilian fleets scrambled to respond to threats that had already vanished. Crystalline defense networks activated weapons that had no targets to engage. The insectoid swarms attempted to surround vessels that no longer existed in their reality. The psychological impact appears to be significant, Dr. Price observed. They are discovering that their military doctrines are based on assumptions that no longer apply. The coordinated demonstration lasted exactly 1 hour. Human vessels appeared and disappeared across 47 star systems, showcasing technology that transformed science fiction into military reality. When the operation concluded, every major species in the galaxy had recorded proof that humanity possessed capabilities beyond their ability to understand or counter. At Nexus Prime, the emergency session continued as reports flooded in from across known space. The alien representatives who had once mocked human military communications now faced the reality that those impossible claims were conservative descriptions of actual human capabilities. Morrison remained seated as chaos erupted around him. The beings who had laughed at humanity's myths about reality-bending warships were now demanding explanations for technology that should not exist. The captain said nothing, letting their panic and confusion speak for itself. The universe was learning that humanity had turned the impossible into routine military operations. The myths were becoming reality, one demonstration at a time. Admiral Sisketh stood on the command deck of his flagship, the massive dreadnought called Dominion's Fang. The reptilian warship stretched for 2 miles from bow to stern and carried enough firepower to destroy entire planets. Around it, 300 of the hegemony's finest vessels formed the largest military formation that had been assembled in recent galactic history. The reptilian admiral's scales had darkened to deep black, showing the rage that burned inside him. His golden eyes reflected the battle displays that surrounded his command chair. The most powerful fleet in known space was preparing to hunt down and destroy what the aliens still believed was a single rogue human. "Vessel, all ships report ready for combat operations," announced his first officer, a scarred veteran named Krathel. "We have enough firepower to crack open moons. Whatever trick technology the humans are using, it will not survive concentrated bombardment from 300 warships." Sisketh nodded his massive head. The hegemony had ruled through superior military might for over 1,000 years. No enemy had ever withstood the combined firepower of a full battle fleet, and he refused to believe that humans had developed technology that could change that fundamental reality. "Intelligence reports indicate the human vessel will appear in the Kepler sector within the next 6 hours, Sisketh hissed. "We will be waiting for it." The reptilian fleet moved through space like a school of predatory fish. Each vessel was armed with weapons that could punch through any known armor and shields that could withstand planet-killing energy beams. The combined mass of the formation created gravitational distortions that smaller ships would need to navigate carefully. Meanwhile, Commander Ryan Fletcher stood on the bridge of the USS Phoenix, watching long-range sensors that showed the massive alien fleet approaching their coordinates. The human ship existed in a state of dimensional flux that made it invisible to normal detection methods, but Fletcher could observe the reptilians clearly. "They really brought everything they had," commented Lieutenant Bobby Martinez from the tactical station. 300 ships with enough firepower to sterilize star systems." Dr. Amanda Price looked up from her dimensional monitoring equipment. Her red hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her green eyes sparkled with scientific curiosity rather than fear. "The energy signatures suggest they are using maximum power settings on all systems. They are not planning to take prisoners." Fletcher activated the communication system that connected the Phoenix to the other human vessels approaching the battle zone. Admiral Kate Sullivan had deployed a full battle group to demonstrate humanity's true military capabilities, but the force consisted of only 12 ships compared to the reptilian armada. "All vessels, this is Phoenix Actual," Fletcher transmitted. "Remember that our objective is demonstration, not destruction. We want them to understand what they are facing, not necessarily to destroy their entire fleet." The responses came from commanders who had spent years training in dimensional warfare tactics. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Rodriguez reported from the USS Mirage, a vessel that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Commander Beth Williams checked in from the USS Wraith, equipped with weapons that could fire through dimensional barriers. The reptilian fleet reached the coordinates where their intelligence sources had predicted the human vessel would appear. Admiral Sisiketh ordered his ships into a massive sphere formation that could deliver devastating firepower from every angle. No single vessel could survive in the center of such concentrated force. Long-range sensors detect energy. Signatures consistent with the reports we have received," announced the Dominion's Fang sensor operator. "The human vessel should materialize within the next few minutes." Siketh activated his fleet communication system. "All ships prepare for immediate engagement. Target anything that appears and destroy it before it can use whatever stealth technology it possesses." The Phoenix began its approach to the reptilian fleet, but not in the way that conventional vessels moved through space. Dr. Price activated the dimensional displacement drives, allowing the ship to exist partially outside normal reality while maintaining full combat capability. "Dimensional phase shift complete," Price reported. "We are now operating in combat configuration across multiple reality layers." Fletcher watched his tactical displays as the Phoenix approached the reptilian formation. The human ship existed in a state that allowed it to observe and target the alien vessels while remaining undetectable to their sensors. What appeared to be magic was actually the practical application of physics that humanity had mastered in secret. "We are within weapons range," Martinez reported. "All systems are ready for engagement." The Phoenix materialized inside the reptilian formation without warning. The human vessel appeared directly in the center of Admiral Sisketh's carefully planned sphere, surrounded by 300 warships that had been waiting to destroy whatever showed up. "There it is," Sisketh roared. "All ships, open fire! Destroy that vessel before it can escape!" The response was immediate and overwhelming. 300 reptilian warships opened fire simultaneously, creating an energy storm that should have vaporized anything caught in its center. Plasma beams, quantum torpedoes, and particle cannons filled the space around the Phoenix, with enough destructive force to crack planets. But the human ship was no longer there. Fletcher had ordered the Phoenix to phase shift the instant it appeared, moving the vessel sideways out of normal space-time just as the reptilian weapons fired. The massive energy barrage passed through empty space while the Phoenix observed from a dimensional layer that the aliens did not know existed. "Phase back to normal space behind their formation," Fletcher ordered. The Phoenix rematerialized directly behind the Dominion's Fang, close enough that the two vessels could have physically touched. The human ship opened fire with weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics, striking reptilian vessels from angles that should have been impossible. Dr. Price monitored the dimensional weapon systems as they fired energy beams through folded space-time. The projectiles appeared to travel in straight lines, but actually followed paths that curved through multiple dimensions, allowing them to strike targets that thought they were protected by the ships in front of them. The USS Mirage chose that moment to demonstrate its own impossible capabilities. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez had equipped his vessel with systems that allowed it to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating what appeared to be dozens of identical ships attacking from different directions. The reptilian fleet found itself under attack by targets that seemed to multiply and divide at will, Sensors showed enemy vessels in positions that could not be reached by conventional movement. Weapons fired from locations that registered as empty space on all detection systems. Commander Williams brought the USS Wraith into the battle with a demonstration that shocked even the experienced human crews. The vessel appeared to turn itself inside out, existing on both sides of normal space simultaneously. Reptilian weapons that tried to target the ship found themselves firing at reflections and shadows that could shoot back. Admiral Sisketh watched in horror as his perfectly planned battle formation dissolved into chaos. His ships were firing at targets that appeared and disappeared faster than weapons could track. The human vessels seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, striking with precision while remaining impossible to hit in return. Concentrate fire on the largest vessel, Sisketh ordered desperately. All ships target the original human ship. The Phoenix responded to the concentrated attack by demonstrating the ultimate expression of dimensional warfare technology. The vessel seemed to split into multiple copies of itself, each one existing in a slightly different layer of reality. The reptilian fleet found itself trying to destroy a dozen identical targets that all appeared to be equally real. Dr. Price monitored the quantum displacement systems as they maintained multiple simultaneous existences across different dimensional phases. The technology that made this possible represented decades of theoretical research, combined with engineering that pushed the boundaries of what materials could withstand. Multiple dimensional manifestations are stable, Price reported. We can maintain this configuration for approximately 30 minutes before system strain requires phase consolidation. Fletcher watched as the reptilian fleet exhausted its ammunition firing at targets that existed in quantum superposition. The alien vessels were designed to fight conventional warfare, but they had no doctrine for engaging enemies that operated outside the normal rules of space and time. The battle continued for 2 hours, but it was not really a battle in any conventional sense. The human ships demonstrated capabilities that redefined what was possible in space combat, while the reptilian fleet struggled to engage targets that existed partially outside reality itself. When the demonstration finally ended, not a single human vessel had been destroyed or even damaged. The reptilian fleet had exhausted most of its ammunition and energy reserves, firing at enemies that could phase in and out of existence at will. Admiral Sisketh stared at his tactical displays in defeat. The most powerful military force in his species' history had been neutralized by 12 human vessels that treated impossible physics as routine military operations. The aftermath of the Kepler sector engagement sent shockwaves through every civilized world in the galaxy. News of the reptilian fleet's defeat spread faster than light-speed communications, as survivors transmitted impossible reports to their homeworlds. 300 of the most advanced warships ever built had been neutralized by 12 human vessels that seemed to operate outside the known laws of physics. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime as emergency sessions continued around the clock. The space station buzzed with activity as representatives from every major species tried to understand what had happened to the fundamental balance of galactic power. The human diplomat wore his simple blue uniform with quiet satisfaction, knowing that the laughter from 3 months ago had been replaced by fear and respect. Lieutenant Zara Collins accompanied Morrison to the main assembly hall, where the Galactic Trade Federation was preparing to make formal contact with humanity's military leadership. The same beings who had dismissed human capabilities, as mythology now desperately wanted to negotiate with the species that had redefined what was possible. In space warfare, the Great Chamber was packed with representatives from dozens of species. Commander Vexthul stood at the center podium, his crystalline form reflecting the emergency lighting that had been activated throughout the station. The Zephyrian leader's musical voice carried none of its previous confidence as he addressed the assembly. We have received confirmation that similar defeats have been reported from across known space, Vexthul announced. Human vessels with impossible capabilities have demonstrated their ability to neutralize any conventional military force. Admiral Sisketh sat in the reptilian section, his once proud scales now pale with defeat and humiliation. The military leader, who had commanded the largest battle fleet in recent history, had returned with reports that his own officers found difficult to believe. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions, weapons that fired through folded space, vessels that could appear anywhere without warning. The Aquatic Consortium's representative bubbled frantically in its tank as translation devices struggled to keep up with the rapid stream of concerns being expressed. Our deepest strongholds have been visited by human vessels, the Aquatic being gurgled. They appeared inside our most secure facilities and departed without engaging in combat. The message was clear. Morrison took his position at the human delegation area and waited as the reports continued. Species after species described encounters with human technology that operated beyond their ability to understand or counter. The myths about reality-bending warships had become the foundation of a new military doctrine that changed everything. Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded the human fleet from her flagship, the USS Phantom, as it maintained position in dimensional space near Nexus Prime. The vessel existed in a reality layer that allowed it to observe the galactic capital without being detected by any known sensor technology. Sullivan could watch the emergency sessions in real time while remaining completely invisible to alien detection systems. All dimensional vessels report successful demonstrations completed, Sullivan announced to her fleet commanders. Every major species has now witnessed our capabilities firsthand. The responses came from across known space as human ships checked in from their assigned positions. Commander Ryan Fletcher reported from the Phoenix, which had completed its mission in the Kepler sector. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Rodriguez confirmed that the Mirage had successfully demonstrated multidimensional existence to the crystalline worlds. Dr. Amanda Price monitored the fleet operations from her position aboard the Phoenix, watching as her theoretical research transformed galactic civilization in real time. The dimensional physics that she had developed in secret laboratories was now reshaping how entire species viewed the nature of reality itself. The psychological impact appears to be exceeding all projections, Price reported. They are not just dealing with superior technology, but with concepts that challenge their understanding of what is possible in the universe. Back at Nexus Prime, the emergency session reached a critical moment as the assembled representatives faced a choice between continued resistance and acknowledgement of the new reality. The silicon-based collective's mechanical representative spoke in tones that carried none of its previous certainty about physical limitations. Our computational models cannot account for the observed phenomena, the collective announced. The energy requirements for dimensional manipulation should exceed the power output of entire star systems. Yet human vessels demonstrate these capabilities as routine operations. Morrison finally rose to address the assembly. The chamber fell completely silent as every being waited to hear what humanity's representative would say. The captain, who had been dismissed as delusional, now commanded the complete attention of galactic civilization. 3 months ago, you found our military reports amusing, Morrison said calmly. You concluded that humanity was either delusional about our capabilities or engaged in deliberate disinformation campaigns. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Every representative remembered the laughter that had greeted human claims about impossible warships and reality-bending technology. Now those same claims had proven to be conservative descriptions of actual human capabilities. You dismissed our naval doctrine as fantasy, Morrison continued. You could not conceive of species that refused to accept the limitations you considered absolute. Today you have learned that your understanding of limitation was itself limited. Admiral Sullivan chose that moment to demonstrate the full scope of human capabilities in a carefully orchestrated show of force. Human vessels began appearing around every major alien stronghold simultaneously, not as threats but as unmistakable statements about humanity's reach across galactic space. The demonstrations were visible from Nexus Prime as human ships materialized around the station itself. Dozens of vessels that had been completely undetectable suddenly became visible, revealing that humanity had been observing the emergency sessions from the beginning. The aliens realized they had never been truly alone or secure. Commander Fletcher watched the reactions of alien forces as the Phoenix appeared directly above the space station. The human vessel existed in a state of controlled dimensional flux that allowed it to occupy the same general area as the station while remaining in a different layer of reality. The strategic implications are becoming clear to them, Fletcher observed. They understand that conventional defenses are meaningless against enemies who can appear anywhere at will. Dr. Price published selected portions of humanity's dimensional research through galactic scientific networks, revealing the theoretical foundations that made impossible technology possible. The equations she shared proved that humans had not just developed new weapons, but had discovered entirely new ways of existing. Within the universe itself, the scientific papers sent shockwaves through alien academic communities, as physicists realized that humanity had mastered forces they had considered purely theoretical. The research showed decades of careful development, turning abstract mathematics into practical military applications. Morrison addressed the assembly one final time as the demonstrations reached their conclusion. Humanity has always believed that the universe contains more possibilities than any single species can imagine, he said. We have specialized in making the impossible become routine. The captain gestured toward the viewports where human vessels continued their carefully controlled displays of dimensional technology. What you called myths were actually conservative descriptions of our developing capabilities. The reality has always been more impressive than the legends. The Galactic Trade Federation formally requested immediate negotiations with humanity's military leadership. The species that had once mocked human capabilities now faced the choice between accommodation and irrelevance. In a universe where the fundamental rules of warfare had changed, Admiral Sisykath stood slowly in the reptilian section, his scales showing the pale patterns of complete submission. The hegemony requests formal alliance with humanity, he announced. We acknowledge that our previous understanding of military capability was insufficient. Similar declarations came from around the chamber, as species after species recognized the new galactic order. The beings who had dismissed human myths about reality-bending warships now understood that those myths had been blueprints for technologies that redefined what was possible. Morrison nodded acceptance of the various requests for alliance and negotiation. Humanity looks forward to productive relationships with species who understand that the universe holds infinite possibilities for those willing to pursue them. The final scene showed human vessels departing from their demonstration positions, phasing back into dimensional space where they would continue their patrols of galactic civilization. The myths had become reality, and reality had proven to be more extraordinary than any myth the aliens had imagined.